It's time for real talk and empowering conversations that matter to our chapter, our community, and for our legacy. Based on Delta Sigma Theta's 5-point programmatic thrust, it's time for DST Dialogues with your host, Jazmin Watson.
Welcome to Montgomery, Alabama Alumni Chapter's MAC-DST Dialogue, where we're having meaningful conversations and highlighting Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated 5 programmatic thrust. Social action is what we do as Deltas. Political awareness and involvement have always been at the heart of our mission. Because when our community is informed, our community shows up. Tonight, we're thrilled to be joined by Kynesha Brown, founder of Rollin to the Polls, a dedicated voter mobilization expert and proud member of the Montgomery, Alabama Alumni Chapter. She'll share insights on empowering voters and ensuring every voice in our community is heard. Thank you for joining us, Kynesha.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so Alabama has seen several changes in voting laws and district lines over the years. So can you start by explaining what voters in Alabama should know about the current landscape heading into 2026 elections?
Absolutely. It's been a lot of changes in terms of like voting rights. After the census, there's been a lot of redistricting happening. And with different lawsuits with Allen v. Milligan, we were able to get a second opportunity district for Congressional District 2, which resulted in the election of some Shamari figures. And just a few weeks ago, we saw a big win with the courts in Birmingham area with the Jefferson County Commission districts, as well as possibly Montgomery getting the second state Senate district. So there has been a lot of changes and more opportunities for Black voters. But with the current political climate that we have right now, everything is really so volatile. We do have a Supreme Court case that's coming up next week that will affect Louisiana, and some states, including Alabama, are watching what's going to happen for that state to kind of plan the trajectory for different voting districts here in Alabama. So while we're celebrating wins, we're also being very cautious of things that are coming. And as we're looking for like 2026 elections, we could be possibly electing someone for a new Senate district or another district in the area, but regardless of what happens, we need to be prepared for what happens.
Yes, and with so many changes, and like you mentioned, there could be new seats that are to be considered when heading to the polls. And I feel like the year is coming to a close rather quickly, and many voters are still unaware of what's actually on the ballot next year. Can you walk us through these key races and issues for voters to have a good understanding of what to expect next year?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're using like next year, but I always look at election season as being like now, because next year will be the time where we're starting to elect. This will be the time that we start looking at the seats that are open, who's running for those positions, and looking at their different issues and platforms to make better decisions. But with the upcoming 2026 elections, these are what is called our statewide elections, and pretty much everything dealing with our state government will be on the ballot during the May primaries and also in November of 2026. And that includes positions for governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, several judicial seats, state auditor, state treasurer. All of the state Senate seats are up. All of the state House of Representative seats are up. So your local legislators, all of them will be up for re-election, or possibility to elect new people for 2026. And I know a lot of times we get more feedback or more engagement on what I call the sexy elections. And when I say sexy elections, like the presidential cycle, like we saw pass in 2024, a lot of people was paying attention to that election because of the people who were running for president, and it kind of went by the wayside because right now we're dealing with municipal elections. Right. And for example, like Birmingham just had a runoff election this past Tuesday, and the voter turnout was like between 5 to 6%. Whereas 2024 saw a higher percentage, but it was still the lowest voter turnout in like 30 years. So it's just been a lot of things to kind of discourage people from voting. But this will be the time now to look at the different issues that you're concerned about in your communities, things that are happening with environmental issues, or if you're concerned about quality of life issues like healthcare, reproductive health, food desert, things like that. These are the people who will dictate what that looks like once they're elected into office in November of next year. So this is a real important election. Not saying every election, there's one election more important than the other, but this will be like key because these will be the people that will plan the trajectory of the state of Alabama.
And so you mentioned that there was low voter participation in Birmingham runoffs last Tuesday. And so before we get into talking about the importance of voter mobilization, can you tell the people a little bit about your organization, Rollin to the Polls, and what some effective strategies you've seen for mobilizing Black communities, especially historically communities that have seen low voter turnout?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rollin to the Polls actually started in 2016, and next year will be on the cusp of 10 years of it being in fruition. And honestly, what it started out as is simply was getting people registered to vote. It happened during that presidential cycle, and we were seeing some things that kind of spilled over on media and just the conversation and engagement for people. So it was just more so like, hey, we got to make sure people are registered to vote so they can vote in the process. So what started out is just going to like a local Dollar Tree to get clipboards and having registration forms and just having voter registration drives and going to neighborhoods to get people registered to vote. We saw it was a deeper issue in the community. Not only were people hesitant to be engaged in the voting process, some were actually willing to be participants in the voting process, but they probably couldn't register to vote due to a felony conviction and did not know they can get their voting rights restored. And then going to the name of the organization, Rollin to the Polls, what we may deem as normalcy with transportation is also considered a luxury to some. Not everyone has adequate access to get to the ballot booth to go vote. So with those things, we wanted to make sure that people not only were registered, but they had all the tools that they needed to restore their rights if they had any kind of criminal conviction that lost their right in the first time. And then also they had a safe ride to get to the polls and vote. So those are some of the things that we did. And then also voter education. A lot of times during election cycles, you have candidates that go to neighborhoods. They may show up in church, may hold your baby, get in the pulpit, and ask for your vote. And then when that election is over, you don't see them anymore. And what we tell people when we get on the ground is like, not only can you vote people into office, you can also vote them out if they're not doing what they're supposed to do in the position that they're in. But also making sure that we teach the community what different roles or different elected offices are responsible for what. Like, for example, a city councilman wouldn't be responsible for your utility rates through Alabama Power, or the governor wouldn't necessarily be concerned about a 4-bedroom size pothole on your street. Right. So just making sure that we know which elected officials are responsible for the certain things and things that you're concerned for. Those are the things that we kind of express to kind of give empowerment to people to get them to vote. So that's a little run through of what Rollin to the Polls is about.
Thank you, Kynesha. This was really great. Coming back, we'll have more after the break.
Just in time for the holiday season. Download your copy of the Black Business Directory and shop and do business with more than 300 Black-owned businesses across the River region this holiday season and beyond. You can download your copy at www.montgomeryalumni.org. It's the perennial holiday favorite, Presented by the Montgomery, Alabama Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, a Crimson and Cream affair, December 13th, 2025 at 7 p.m. at 17 Springs in Millbrook, Alabama. It will be an elegant evening of style, great food, and music. It's a party with a purpose that supports the chapter's scholarship programs and community service initiatives. Individual tickets can be purchased on the Montgomery Alumni website or from any chapter member. For more information, visit montgomeryalumni.org or DST MAC on Facebook.
Thank you for explaining to the people what Rollin's in the Polls, the work that you're doing in the community. And as you stated before, there was a need in the community to have an organization that can combat against voter suppression. So can you just dive a little bit deeper into what are some big barriers Alabamians are facing right now when they're going to the polls? Anywhere from voter ID restrictions, registration, purging from the polls, access to the polls. How can groups address these challenges?
Yeah, I'm glad. That's a wonderful question, because one thing that we've been paying attention to during the municipal cycle has been the level of voters that have been purged from local voting rolls. And what we notice in two people who are considered active voters, and when I say active voters, those who frequently go to vote in every election. We've noticed in some municipal areas, not Montgomery, because Montgomery did not have a municipal election this year, but in other municipalities across the state, we've noticed those who have been active voters have been trying to go vote and their name wasn't found anywhere on the voting rolls. One thing that Rollin to the Polls is a part of is an election protection network. We do this in partnership with LDF, NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, and ACLU of Alabama. So on every election cycle, they set up what they call a war room to collect any kind of issues that voters may experience on election day at the ballot booth. And one of the highest volumes of concerns that we received through the election protection hotline was people not being on voting rolls when they go vote. So that is something LDF and ACLU of Alabama have been working on to try to correct those complaints or incident reports. They immediately contact the probate judge or the electors that are in that area to try to fix the issue. Customarily, we normally tell people at the ballot booth, at the polling precinct, if they go to try to vote and they're not on the roll, they can get a provisional ballot. I sometimes, and it's just personally speaking, sometimes push against that in terms of provisional ballots, because if you're voting and you're not on the voting roll and it comes out that you weren't supposed to be at that particular polling location, your provisional ballot doesn't count anyway. They throw it out. The provisional ballot is only in place if there was an incorrection on the Board of Registrar's part or the polling location part. And when they correct it, they can validate your ballot if it's correct, if you're at the proper polling location. But if you're not and it comes out that you're not, then that vote doesn't count. So where groups like Roll to the Polls and other groups come in, if that's the issue, we try to push out like, hey, if you're not listed as a voter at the polling location, call us and we can get you to the right location so your voice can count. So your vote can count, excuse me. But those are some items of voter suppression. Another thing that a lot of people don't talk about is voter ID. Voter ID is customary because we do think people have access to a proper ID, but that's not always the case, especially in our rural areas. Sometimes it may be 30, 40 miles for a person to go to their local Department of Motor Vehicles to get a proper voter ID. And even though the Secretary of State does have options where people can go out in the community to do voter ID, sometimes it may not be, within a good time frame ahead of an election. So So there have been obstacles. I will say some of it has gotten a little bit better, but normally when you take 2 steps forward, you get kind of knocked back
right
4 or 5 pegs. So it's an ongoing process to make sure that everyone has a fair and equal access to vote. Yeah.
Yes, and as this conversation centers around what's at stake for 2026, and you said it in the beginning of this conversation as the election season is right now. We don't wait until we get into 2026.
Right.
We have to do the work now, whether that is registering people to vote, having those conversations, the civic education, and just bringing voter awareness in our communities. So as we prepare for 2026, just entering into that year, what actions can listeners take to make a difference?
I would say, and I'm just gonna just do an example and bring it back to why I'm saying that. Several years ago, Georgia was able to accomplish flipping a lot of their congressional seats blue. And that was a big win. And when that happened, I started seeing chatter of, well, Alabama needs to do this. Alabama needs a Stacey Abrams. We need somebody like that in Alabama. And one thing a couple of things I kind of pushed back on was that what we saw unfolded in Georgia didn't happen overnight. That was like 10 to 12 years of on the ground, grassroots organizing, meeting people where they are. And it didn't just come from one person leading that. It was like a multitude of organizations that was doing that. And I would say the same here in Alabama. Although we've seen some setbacks in terms of like grassroots organizing, there are organizations, and of course I want to do a shameless plug for Rollin to the Polls, but there are other organizations within the state and also locally that's similar to Rollin to the Polls that do so much more and do things every day that people can like tap into. ACLU of Alabama, they host so many different events across the state of Alabama that doesn't just deal with voting rights. It also deals with maternal health and things that are happening with our prisons and things like that. Alabama Arise have been very instrumental in lowering the grocery tax here in Alabama. And we have the Ordinary People Society who works with formerly incarcerated people to make sure they're reacclimated to society. There's different things here in Alabama. You don't have to do just voting or just other things. There's a place for everyone. One thing that we don't talk about enough in Alabama are environmental issues. I think recently, a couple months ago, it was determined that in Lowndes County, they was going to lose some of their federal granting from the current administration to help with sewage issues in Lowndes County, which was a blow, and that's very hurtful to the residents that's in Lowndes County because they're dealing with some issues and diseases that are kind of considered eradicated elsewhere. But in addition to Lowndes County, there are other areas in Alabama, even in Montgomery, that has sewage, water, and infrastructure issues. And there are groups like Alabama Rivers Alliance and other environmental groups, GAS, that are helping to fight against those environmental issues. So there's ways to plug in, but I also tell people, don't think that when you want to get involved that it has to be like on the ground, knocking on doors every day. People have different places where they can fit in. If you're not comfortable going into a neighborhood, knocking on doors, talking to people, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. I don't talk all the time, but I can write a mean press release or something like that. If I need to shoot something out to friends, I can do that. People may not feel comfortable getting in people's faces to talk all the time, but they can fold letters or they can send postcards to remind people to vote. Or we have people who are social butterflies that don't mind driving people to the polls. It's little things that we can do collectively. And I say collectively and also in a collaboration spirit, that if we do that together and strengthen numbers, we really could accomplish so many things. We don't have to do it in a competitive spirit or for recognition because we just want to do good. We want to see our communities thrive. So by plugging in, getting involved, when you go out into the communities, meet people where they are. We can't just have like a voter registration drive outside of the Delta building and expect people to come to us to register to vote, we kind of have to go out into the communities and build relationships with those people. We don't want to just come once every election cycle, like, hey, we're here. We want to make sure you register to vote, go vote, and we never see them again. Yeah. That's how you get people disengaged, and that also builds distrust within the community. So making sure that we're being seen, we're not telling people what to do, we're listening to people. One of the things I tell people, and I was guilty of this, when I used to tell people to register to vote and they may come and tell me, oh, well, I don't want to vote, I don't care about voting, I automatically get on the defensive, like, people die for your right to vote. You should be able to vote. But not everybody grew up to understand or be astute in the political landscape that we have in Alabama, so where they can really correlate that people die for your right to vote. Exactly. But so I had to walk it back and sit and listen as to well, tell me why you don't want to vote, or tell me what your issues are. And by listening to them, I hear what their concerns are. And once I hear their concerns, I tie it to who is responsible for the issue that you're seeing. Right. And how you can change that is not just by voting, but by going to participate in those meetings. Go to that city council meeting, go to that school board meeting. Go to that housing authority meeting, hear what they're saying, because a lot of those decisions that you get concerned about or reactive about are happening in that time. And normally when it kind of gets to us, we're more reactive than proactive. So that's a step two, to kind of get in the process and just stay engaged. I know it's hard to stay engaged with the current climate we have right now. It's just a lot of information out there. There's a lot of craziness that's happening right now. And you have to moderate that, but don't disengage to the point that you just don't know what's going on. Because that's sometimes when you become oblivious and you disengage fully, that's when the devil can sneak up on you and take you for all that you have. But be engaged, pace your steps, and then find out how you can get in where you fit in.
Get in where you fit in, because there is a place for everyone.
It's a place for everybody in the movement work.
And
definitely.
They always say that if you don't do voting, voting will do you, right? Politics will do you.
Politics will do you. I hear all the time people say, I don't do politics. And I'm like, politics do you, whether you want to or not.
Exactly. So. And you don't get to participate in the fight if you don't get in the ring. And so that's why we're having this conversation now, to really connect and engage our community around what is at stake for 2026 and how can you get involved in your communities. And so I want to say thank you, Kynesha.
Thank you for having me.
We are so thankful for you joining us and providing your insight on voting in 2026. Your passion for civic engagement has made it clear that political awareness is key to progress in our communities in Alabama, in the South, and as a nation, right? And so we want to encourage you all to continue educating, empowering, and encouraging each other to show up and make a difference. Thank you for tuning in to MAC-DST Dialogues. For more information about our chapter's events and activities, visit our website at MontgomeryAlumnaeDST.org. To like and follow and share Montgomery Alumni Chapter on Facebook and Instagram, and also YouTube.
Got a story idea you think we'd like to feature on MAC-DST Dialogues? Email your ideas to corresponding secretary at MontgomeryAlumnae.org or visit the MAC-DST Dialogue show page on the Montgomery, Alabama Alumni Chapter website at MontgomeryAlumnae.org.